He was just 18, walking down a quiet street in Northolt, West London with a few mates. But within minutes, that ordinary night turned into a nightmare. When the roar of mopeds suddenly came tearing around the corner, masked figures armed with knives. They weren't there to steal. They were there to kill. Jason Isaacs, a popular and hard-working teenager, was chased down and stabbed multiple times in a vicious, targeted attack. He'd done nothing wrong. He was simply in the wrong place at the worst possible time. The assault was swift, deliberate, and horrifying, but it wasn't random. It was due to a growing culture of postcode wars, gang rivalries, and drill music that glorified revenge. Jason fought for his life for 3 days, before his heart gave out. What followed was a relentless investigation, a dramatic trial, and a grieving family's desperate plea for justice. But the real question still haunts the city. Why Jason? He wasn't in a gang. He wasn't looking for trouble. So why did they hunt him down? The answers would take a year-long investigation, and a relentless police investigation to finally emerge. This is the shocking story of Jason Isaacs, a young life stolen by senseless violence, and the fight for justice that followed. Jason Isaacs was 18 years old, a bright, respectful young man from Northolt, West London. He wasn't involved in gangs or violence. He was focused on building a future. Jason had once been scouted by Queen's Park Rangers for football, but more recently, he'd turned his attention to carpentry, training as an apprentice and putting in the work to learn a trade. Those who knew him described him as quiet but confident, always polite, always smiling. His mother, Sharon Kendall, said he was the kind of son who stayed close to home, who made good choices, and who genuinely cared about people. Jason had a wide circle of friends and a strong bond with his family. He loved music, football, and had a calm, easygoing presence that made people trust him. But outside of Jason's world, London was facing a growing crisis. Knife crime was rising. In 2017 alone, the capital saw a surge in youth violence, much of it driven by postcode rivalries and gang feuds. Even for those like Jason, who had nothing to do with that life, the streets weren't always safe. And in this environment, simply being in the wrong place could make you a target. It was Saturday the 14th of October, 2017. Around 10:30 p.m., Jason Isaacs was walking with a small group of friends along Newnham Close in Northolt, West London. The night was calm, nothing out of the ordinary. But just as they were making their way down the road, the sound of engines broke the silence. A group of 4 masked boys, riding stolen mopeds, tore around the corner. According to witness accounts, they moved quickly and deliberately. Their faces were hidden, headlights turned off, and at least 2 of them were visibly armed with a large knife. Jason and his friends panicked and ran. The group split in different directions, each trying to escape the sudden threat. But the attackers locked onto Jason. He was chased down by at least 3 of the riders. When they caught up to him near the entrance of a narrow alley just off Newnham Close, the ambush turned deadly. Jason was stabbed multiple times. The assault was rapid, brutal, and unprovoked. It lasted just moments, but the damage was catastrophic. Once the attackers fled the scene on their mopeds, Jason was left collapsed on the pavement, critically injured and alone. Residents, hearing the noise, rushed out of their homes. Someone dialed 999 at 10:32 p.m. Paramedics arrived to find Jason barely conscious, suffering from multiple stab wounds to the chest and abdomen. He was immediately taken by ambulance to St. Mary's Hospital in Paddington, where trauma teams worked through the night to try and save his life. Jason was placed on life support. His family were called to his bedside, where they waited in agony, hoping for a miracle. But despite 3 days of intensive care, Jason never woke up. On Tuesday, the 17th of October, 2017, he passed away from his injuries. He was just 18 years old, a young man with no criminal ties, No history of violence, taken in a senseless and savage attack. Now, we want to hear from you. Have we normalized youth violence in our cities to the point where this no longer shocks us? And if you were in Jason's parents' shoes, what would justice look like to you? Drop your thoughts in the comments, because conversations like this need to be heard. Following the brutal attack on Jason Isaacs on November 18, 2017, the Metropolitan Police launched an intensive investigation to identify and apprehend those responsible. Despite Jason's lack of involvement in gang activities, detectives suspected the attack was targeted, possibly linked to local gang tensions. In the days immediately following the incident, authorities appealed to the public for information, urging witnesses to come forward. The community's cooperation was deemed vital in piecing together the events of that fateful night. A significant breakthrough occurred when forensic analysis on one of the mopeds used in the attack revealed DNA evidence linking 18-year-old Joel Amade to the crime. This discovery provided investigators with a crucial lead, placing Amade at the scene. Subsequently, law enforcement officials reviewed extensive CCTV footage from the area surrounding the attack. The surveillance videos captured the movements of the masked assailants on mopeds, corroborating witness statements and strengthening the case against the suspects. Based on the accumulated evidence, including the DNA findings and CCTV analysis, authorities arrested and charged Joel Amade with Jason Isaacs' murder. The investigation continued as detectives sought to identify and apprehend the remaining individuals involved in the ambush. The trial of Joel Amade began on March 18, 2019, at the Old Bailey in London. Amade, who was just 18 at the time of the attack, stood accused of murdering Jason Isaacs, a crime that had stunned the city and shattered a family. Over the weeks that followed, jurors were shown the brutal truth behind what had happened that night. The prosecution laid out the timeline, how 4 masked men on mopeds had ambushed Jason and his friends in Northolt. Armed with machetes, they had chased Jason into a residential street, cornered him, and stabbed him multiple times before fleeing. 8 stab wounds. That was what doctors had counted, each one a mark of cruelty. Key to the case was the forensic evidence. Joel Amade's DNA was recovered from one of the mopeds used in the attack, placing him at the scene. CCTV footage showed a man matching his build and clothing, riding away with the group moments after the stabbing. The jury needed little more. On April 12, 2019, they returned a unanimous verdict. Joel Amade was found guilty of murder. On May 28, he returned to court for sentencing. Judge Mark Dennis handed him a life sentence with a minimum of 20 years behind bars. In court, Jason's mother, Sharon Kendall, gave a powerful statement. Her voice broke as she spoke about her son, his smile, his future, the life he never got to live. She called for change and for tougher action against knife crime. And for justice not just for Jason, but for every family torn apart by violence. As Amade was led away, there was no sense of victory. Just a cold, quiet reminder that nothing could bring Jason back. Jason's case is just one of many, but his story matters, and his voice, though silenced, still echoes in every conversation about youth violence, justice, and change.